Joining us for today's Political Roundup, University of Houston political science lecturer Nancy Sims and party politics co-host and UH political science professor Jeronimo Cortina. Good morning to you both.
Good morning, Craig.
Morning, Craig.
Let's start with this voting rights redistricting case that the High Court is hearing today out of Louisiana. What are the judges being asked to consider, Nancy?
Well, this is a really complex case because 2 years ago, the Supreme Court ruled that it's a racial redistricting issue. And 2 years ago in the state of Alabama, the court ruled that they needed more African-American representation. Now this case is about Louisiana, and essentially a group of non-black voters filed suit saying that they didn't need another black district, even though 30% of Louisiana's population is black. So it's an opportunity for the Supreme Court to either confirm or overturn their previous decision 2 years ago. And I would just say it's the ongoing continuation of the chipping away of the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah, so the last case, the one out of Alabama, the issue was, you are intentionally keeping only one district in your state, one that black voters are able to, as a coalition essentially, elect a representative from.
Right.
And now the question is, can Louisiana, now that they've established two such districts, can voters who aren't black say, well, now you are intentionally on racial lines, you're putting your thumb on the scale the other way.
Correct.
And the High Court might potentially rule both are right. That could create a lot of confusion. What are the potential implications here in Texas?
Well, obviously, the potential implication is once they go to the Supreme Court, it sets some sort of precedent, right? And we can start, years back ago with the Holder decision in terms that partisan redistricting is fine. What is not fine, according to the Voting Rights Act, what is not fine in terms of our Constitution, one vote, one person, one vote, is that every single person must have the same right and the same chance to elect the representative that they want, regardless of political party or anything like that. So the implication for this case is that the Supreme Court may set a precedent that eventually you can move on. And the question here is, are you redistricting because of partisan preferences, or are you redistricting because of issues regarding race, ethnicity, et cetera, that obviously are prohibited by law?
And again, it's really a question of, are they suggesting the one remaining major provision of the Voting Rights Act, is it now in fact unconstitutional? Because this is because of the result of how states are interpreting it.
Correct. And that is significant because if you lose, we like to call them opportunity districts. They're drawn to give cohesive communities opportunity to elect a person that represents them. But if you take this consideration that the Voting Rights Act has required away, it could be very significant for redistricting across the country and shift control of the power of Congress, partisan-wise as well.
Now, the Constitution doesn't say anything about cohesive communities, though.
No, it doesn't.
It is focusing on individual voters, and so there is some question here whether it's intellectual and that's different from what practically maybe the results. It's got the justices sort of twisted in knots because at least two of them, it would seem, are seriously considering reversing the decision they just made 2 years ago.
Yeah, and once again, it's an issue that when you're thinking about redistricting, it's a political issue, right? So the process is inherently political. So whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, you're going to do everything in your power to solidify whatever advantage you have, because Republicans do it and Democrats do it as well. So given that this process is inherently political, you're going to have political results. And these are the results that we are observing now. Now, how you overcome that? Well, the simple way is to do it in such a way that politics is out of the equation. Obviously, that's wishful thinking. I understand that. Is it possible? It is possible, I think, right? And have everyone give the same chance to be able to elect the person that they want. And also for political parties to be responsible in the sense of what they're doing. So elections are also a competitive market, quote unquote, in the sense that a Republican goes, says what they want, a Democrat goes, says what they're selling. And then we, the voters, decide is, oh, I like this product, or no, I don't like this product, right? So given that competitiveness of the electoral market, I know that it's also wishful thinking, right? But I'm trying to think ahead, is something that needs to be codified in how we do redistricting. As simple as that. But politics.
In another federal court case being heard today, a judge in San Francisco is being asked to weigh whether or not to temporarily halt the latest wave of layoffs by the Trump administration. The American Federation of Government Employees and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, that's AFSCME, together these two unions represent more than 800,000 federal workers. They accuse the Trump administration of, quote, using federal employees as pawns to impose political pressure on the administration's perceived opponents in Congress. All right, here's my question. Doesn't the Trump administration have every right to dictate who works in its own government?
They do, but they also have labor contracts with federal workers across the government, so those have to be respected. And that's what's stemming this particular lawsuit.
So, I mean, yes, but once again, we're going into the deeper question. And the deeper question is in terms of what the executive can and cannot do. All these agencies, all these employers have been one way or another codified into law by Congress, right? I don't know, Department of Labor, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. Then the Department of Labor has this much people working in order to complete 1, 2, 3. So the question is, if firing people, especially when we are in a shutdown, makes sense, or is it a legal maneuver? First of all, because Congress has said this agency is going to do 1, 2, and 3. If the court system says, well, yes, no, that is going to have implications for the bigger strategy that the Trump administration wants to accomplish, and it's simply, can the executive have more power? And it's also very different in terms of government is not a corporation. Government is not something that you can manage as if you were the CEO of a big corporation. If you're the CEO of a big corporation, yes, you hire and fire at your will, right? You give a 2 weeks notice, end of story, bye-bye. But in government, it has another implication because we're not trying to maximize stakeholders' utility, right? Government provides public goods that the market or the public sector cannot simply supply. So different concepts. So it's problematic when we try to equate private enterprises with the role of government.
Reporters at media organizations as wide-ranging as NPR, The Washington Post, Fox News, and Newsmax are all turning in their Pentagon press passes after refusing to sign a pledge that they would not gather information that has not been authorized for release by the Defense Department. So they will still report on the department. They just won't have access to the Pentagon. Why did Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth seek this out in the first place?
Well, he wants to control the messaging from the department. They've had an extensive number of leaks, but there have always been leaks out of the Pentagon. That is not unique to this administration or any previous administration. It's part of how reporters monitor what's happening in the Pentagon and in the military. And so, but Hegseth wants the media to repeat a specific story that he controls. And to me, it's astounding that our currently fractured media landscape that there's a uniting factor between all the various media outlets that they're not going to accept his dictate.
On the socials, as you might imagine, the most ardent Trump administration supporters are defending this policy, arguing it is in the interest of national security and that reporters will just have to do their work someplace else.
Well, when Secretary has got confirmed, one of his promises was to make the Department of Defense the most transparent agency in the history of the Department of Defense. And so far, we have not seen that. So the press play a very important role in terms of our democracy. Why? Because it's the fourth power. It's a power that is going to balance what we, the public, should know, right, about those that we elected to govern us. So it is a contract between us and the government. The government, just simply by winning an election, doesn't have a carte blanche and say, I'm going to do whatever it is. Yes, they have a popular mandate, of course, but they're still accountable to the voters. They're still accountable to the laws. They're still accountable to transparency. So the more transparent they are, the better, right? But in this case, I don't know.
There's a terrific article by NPR's Tom Bowman explaining his reasoning for turning in his Pentagon press pass. He cites some very specific examples of, over many years, different administrations, when conversations he had in those hallways led to the public learning things that had real influence on foreign policy. And so you can check that out at npr.org. So far, the ceasefire that President Trump brokered between Israel and Hamas is holding in Gaza, tenuously so. Israel has kept a border crossing between Egypt and Gaza closed and cut the amount of aid allowed to enter. This is in retaliation, Israel says, for what it says are delays in Hamas handing over bodies of dead hostages. The reality there obviously remains very grim. And very long history suggests this ceasefire is not likely to last long, sadly. Nevertheless, any day without widespread violence, it's a start. You're here to talk politics, so I'll ask you politically. Who stands to gain or lose should this ceasefire hold? Who gains and loses if it doesn't?
Well, the world gains if it holds because it's created such complex policy and issues across the world. But if it doesn't hold, Hamas obviously will regain some control. And in fact, they're having skirmishes within Gaza right now because of who's in charge of Gaza with Hamas leaders. So there's that aspect of it. But then, I don't think anybody really wins if the war continues. It just causes harm to more people. And stopping the aid going in is not going to stop, the people dying of malnutrition right now that are in Gaza. So the humanitarian feeling is, please make it hold. But I think today is very concerning.
Yeah. Back here in the Houston area, Harris County Attorney and congressional candidate Christian Menefee says his team is looking into whether or not to sue the state over the planned removal of rainbow crosswalks at one intersection in Montrose. We talked about this in some detail on the show last week, but to review, these crosswalks have been in place for almost a decade, were recently removed while Metro did some street repairs, and they were repainted. Now Governor Abbott is threatening to take away state funding for street repairs for any municipality that doesn't remove political messaging from roadways within 30 days. Metro, in response, has interpreted that to mean, okay, we got to remove the rainbow crosswalk. Would the county have a case against the state over this?
It's unclear, and I understood Christian Menefee to say that he's researching whether there's a case. But I would say, Craig, that if he doesn't sue, someone else will. The ACLU or Equality Texas or someone else will file a lawsuit over these crosswalks. And in this particular case, the governor is attacking the rainbow crosswalks, but there are many roadside murals and varieties of representations along roads. You've got your memorials from where people were hit with bicycles, the ghost bikes as we call them. So, does everything, the crosses that are set up on the highway between Houston and Austin, so does everything now fall into that category? And I think it's a very kind of responsive move that Governor Abbott took without looking at the whole picture. Removing these crosswalks could affect this. It'll have a domino effect that I'm not sure they thought through. So there'll definitely be a lawsuit.
Jeronimo, what's coming up on Party Politics?
So we're going to talk about how some Texas guardsmen were sent home because they were not in line with the Department of Defense or Secretary Heskett points of view in terms of how fit they need to be. We're talking also about how Attorney General Paxton, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal just indicating some of the money that he has made during office. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and the implications for the race. Of course, we're going to talk about Democrats in the Senate, the candidates in the Democratic Senate primary, how they're campaigning in South Texas and the implications for the election.
Geronimo Cortina is the co-host of Houston Public Media's Party Politics program. You can catch it Friday nights at 7:30 on News 88.7, Friday nights at 8 o'clock on Houston Public Media TV 8. It's available on YouTube as well and wherever you get your podcasts. Geronimo is also a political science professor at the University of Houston. That is where Nancy Sims is a political science lecturer. She is also the co-host of the Default of Democracy podcast. Geronimo, Nancy, thank you both very much.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.